Okay, so now let's look at nomenclature for binary molecular compounds. So this is going to be between two nonmetals being bonded together via a covalent bond. So here we have B2H4. So we got to look at the name for boron, the name for hydrogen here, which is the H. But then we have to look at the subscripts for each of these in order to determine what Greek prefix we're going to put in front of the names for boron and hydrogen. So boron has a subscript of 2. So we're going to look at the Greek prefix. The prefix for 2 is di. So we will put diboron for the first one. Then we look at hydrogen as a suffix or a subscript of 4. The Greek prefix for 4 is tetra. So we write that down. And then we write down hydrogen, but we switch the ending to "ide," just like we did with ionic compounds. So it'll be hydride. So diboron tetrahydride would be the formula for B2H4. So let's take a look at this next compound. We have P2 and we have O5. So if we look at this, P is phosphorus, O is oxygen. So now let's look at the subscripts to figure out what prefix we put in front of each of those. So phosphorus has the 2 subscript. So 2 we know is going to be di. And then of course we have phosphorus. So now we can look at oxygen. It has a 5 subscript. So the Greek prefix for 5 is penta. So we will put penta. And then we're going to then take our O, so oxygen, and switch that to oxide. So we have to switch the ending to "ide" just like we did with the ionic compound naming. So now let's look at CO. So we have a molecular compound consisting of carbon and oxygen. So if we were to look at this, we look at the subscripts, of course, and there's no subscripts, so they pretty much mean that there's going to be one of those. Just got to remember, ones are not written down. So if we were to look at this, of course, carbon, we write that down. Since there's a 1 and it is the first element, we do not add any Greek prefix if there is one of them. However, we have oxygen that does have 1, but since it's the second element, we do have to add the prefix for 1, which in this case is mono. So we write mon, we cut off the O because oxygen starts with the vowel O. And then we would just continue on with oxygen swinging the ending to "ide." So it would be carbon monoxide. So remember, no prefix is needed if there is just one of the first element. If there's one of the second element, you do need the prefix mono. If the element starts with an O or an A, you cut off the A of the fix. So here we have SO2. So S with one of them. So there's subscript 1, even though it's implied as 1. So we do not need the prefix mono since it is the first element. So we just write sulfur. Since the second element is oxygen, there has a suffix of 2. The prefix for 2 is di. Then we switch oxygen to oxide. So it's sulfur dioxide. So if we look at this, we have tetraphosphorus triselenide. So we have the element phosphorus, and we have the element selenide, which is selenium. And then we have our prefixes of tetra and our prefix of tri. So what we want to do for this is first let's write down the symbols, and then we will write down the subscripts based off of the prefixes. So phosphorus, of course, is going to be P. And selenide, if you look at that, find selenium, it is Se. So phosphorus has the prefix tetra. Tetra means 4, so we're going to put a 4 behind the symbol P for phosphorus. And selenide has a prefix of tri, which is 3, so we put that after the symbol for selenium, Se. So we have a completed formula of P4Se3. So we now have disilicon hexabromide. So we're dealing with silicon and we're dealing with bromide, which is bromine. We have a prefix of di and we have a prefix of hexa. So silicon, if we look on the periodic table, the symbol for silicon is Si. The symbol for bromide, which is bromine, is Br. So now let's look at the prefixes to figure out these subscripts. So the prefix for silicon is di, which means that the suffix is going to be 2. We look at prefix on bromide, which is hexa. Hexa is 6, so that means the subscript for bromine is going to be 6. So our completed formula for disilicon hexabromide is Si2Br6. Here we have diselenium diiodide. So we have diselenium, and then we have diiodide. So selenium is Se. Get that from the periodic table. Since it has the prefix of di, we put a 2 behind that. So iodide is iodine. The periodic table symbol for that is an I. Since it has di, it's going to have a suffix of 2. So the completed formula for diselenium diiodide is Se2I2. So here we have silicon dioxide. So we have the element silicon, but there is no prefix in front of it. Then we have oxide, which is oxygen, but it has a prefix of di. So let's write the symbol for silicon. You can find that on the periodic table. That is Si. Since there is no prefix in front of it, this means that there is one of them. And just like don't write the prefix here for the one on the first one, we don't write the prefix of 1 here in the formula. So now we go to oxide, which is oxygen. The prefix of di means 2, so we put 2 behind that. So we have the complete formula for silicon dioxide as SiO2.